left to kick around a couple of familiar political footballs, expanding the convention center and replacing Qualcomm Stadium. So let's welcome in Scott Lewis, editor of Voice of San Diego, our esteemed media partner for the last decade, Tony Manolatos, spokesman for Mayor Faulkner's Stadium Advisory Group, and Dan McLellan, a stadium activist who has been working on behalf of a downtown stadium site. And we'll see if that is still germane to the conversation. Scott, why don't we start with you? Where does the mayor's takeaway from last week's convention center report that was released leave the Chargers, or have they already?
I do think they're determined to move to L.A., but putting that aside, we were waiting for months to see what this study said and to see how the mayor would react to it. The study was going to analyze the question of whether we just get a bigger building or whether we try for a split convention center, a sort of campus atmosphere. As opposed to the contiguous that every's been. Right, that bigger building. Mm-hmm. And so if you did the campus, if this study came out and said, boy, that campus would be great, and you will do that split convention center, well, then that idea of a downtown convention or a stadium plus a convention center, a convadium, if you will, right? That might propel it forward, because that's the idea that the Chargers were talking about for years, and the mayor also at the same time endorsed a tax increase for that bigger building after he reacted, but he ended up choosing that bigger building and a tax increase to pay for it. Now, he says he's still open to this campus atmosphere if that is to fall apart, but it looks like yet another setback for some who might have hoped that that was the ulterior sort of route that people were taking. Right. There was a thought for maybe a 1,600-room hotel there. That would get some TOT, and then at any rate, Tony, is it true or not true that essentially the politics of downtown hoteliers, their known opposition to an East Village stadium site, being a huge obstacle in this conversation, it kind of figured into CSAG's view of which way to go, Mission Valley or downtown?
Well, when we met with the Chargers and when the mayor met with the Chargers, Gene, as you know, they told us that they were site agnostic, that they really what they wanted and what the NFL wanted was an actionable plan under the NFL's timeline. And
well,
so,
they changed their mind and flipped the script.
Well, I think that's an engineered argument on their part to try to make their case to get up to L.A. They've been moving the goalposts all along. So there's argument that them that geez, if we had a downtown option, we'd be interested in San Diego. It's just not true. They're not interested in the San Diego solution while L.A. is in play. But
the hoteliers were a stumbling block anyway. True?
No, the tax increase was a stumbling block.
Okay. All right.
The tax increase to put a stadium downtown would require a tax increase, and we just thought that's just a non-starter. So in Mission Valley, you have all the land. You don't need a tax increase. So there was a lot of reasons, but when it came down to it, it was the land that the city owned versus the land that the city didn't own downtown, and the tax increase that would be required downtown and the tax increase that wouldn't be required in Mission Valley.
Dan, you want to jump in here?
I totally disagree with what Tony's saying here. When CSAG met with members that were campaigning for a stadium, they specifically said the downtown politics of the convention center and the hoteliers were a huge obstacle to going downtown.
Hoteliers representing what, about 7,000 to 8,000 rooms?
Well, they actually brought up the number of rooms and why it was an obstacle there. And I tried to argue there are other hoteliers who would be in favor of a downtown convention center stadium, because at least it provides a clear path for getting a convention center done for them. Even today, we have no clear path to getting a convention center. If we go back to this idea of a contiguous space, be sure it's going to be fought by attorneys like Corey Briggs, who are going to absolutely oppose.
Got a case pending already that's going to go possibly years.
Right, oppose any expansion onto waterfront property. Tony's telling you here, hey, we're against the tax when it's for a stadium, but all of a sudden the mayor comes up because, well, we're for this same tax, let's put it to the voters and get a 2/3 vote for a convention center. It's not logical. It does not make sense. And the great thing is Briggs has put something out there that would allow us to get the funding with a 50% vote. We can get then a second initiative with a 50% vote to get the stadium and convention center downtown.
And we park it right here. We want to come back to that. He's got, I think, that he's talking about round one here, and we're going to drill down further. And coming up later, after that break, we will see why the Jacksonville Jaguars have suddenly crept into this conversation on Big Cat Feed. And we resume our discussion of issues surrounding an expansion of the convention center and the futures of the Chargers in San Diego, or lack thereof. With us once again, Scott Lewis from Voice of San Diego, Tony Manolatos, the Stadium Advisory Group spokesman, and stadium activist Dan McLellan. And where we left off, Scott, is Corey Briggs. That name is on everybody's tongue a lot. He's already got pending litigation, which is going to the trial stage, so we know that stuff is going to kite up to appellate courts, maybe the Supreme Court. What's your thought about this going forward? I tried to get him on at one point, and Steve Cushman, but they never come on.
Well, his argument is that that bigger building along the waterfront prohibits access to the waterfront, or at least inhibits it so much that it's illegal. We have access laws that require that. And so that's a pretty formidable lawsuit, and combined with the tax increase, it makes this route to an expanded convention center not an easy one. It is interesting that the mayor endorsed a tax increase for the convention center, but a combined convention center stadium could not get a tax increase, or was impossible. And I think that indicates, I don't actually think that's incorrect. I think that hotel industry folks might oppose a convention center stadium tax increase. And you can't have anybody oppose a tax increase when it needs two-thirds vote. Two-thirds vote is so hard to get that if anybody opposes it with any kind of organization and money, it's done.
Right. I know county voters didn't even do it for fire causes. Is that?
Yeah, but it got more than 60% of the vote.
Okay.
But again, you need, in 2004, we tried to raise the tax, the hotel room tax 2.5%. And they had everybody on board, police officers, firefighters, the hotel industry mostly. But just a few people were against it. It got 64% of vote, not 67 that it needed.
Your thoughts here, Tony?
You know, I really think this argument that we continue to have about downtown versus Mission Valley for the Chargers Stadium, it's a goofy argument to continue to have, because the Chargers would lose millions of dollars a year downtown. They would make a lot more money at a new stadium in Mission Valley.
And how about L.A.? We're hearing you're already channeled into Stan Kroenke's one of the locker rooms in Inglewood.
Exactly. They're either going to end up as the #2 team in Inglewood or with a new stadium in Mission Valley. Mission Valley, as I've said recently, gives the Chargers in the NFL Disney World, a whole bunch of land to have an NFL experience, to have other sports and entertainment venues, to have a parking complex where the Chargers capture all that revenue.
Disney World, that's an interesting
Downtown gives them Disneyland. There's no room down there to have a parking structure. There's no room to tailgate. You lose all that concession money downtown. So they would lose millions of dollars downtown each year.
Dan, I want to bring you in on this, and just know that NBC7 has confirmed that a member of the Stadium Advisory Group did reach out at one point to somebody in the Jacksonville Jaguars organization. And does it make sense, would it, for the sake of due diligence at least, that a team that's about to lose its NFL franchise would look into the prospect of another one? But we're hearing that Jacksonville is going to go to, probably St. Louis to backfill if the Rams move. Do you have a thought about this chess game here? Is this just crazy, the Jags even thinking about San Diego?
The city has no leverage. That's what's been going on in this entire process. Everything CSAG's done has been an attempt to try to create leverage to move to Mission Valley to appease the hoteliers. Not about saving the Chargers in San Diego. And that's just an unfortunate situation. He mentions Disneyland, and he mentions the parking structure.
And Disney World, okay.
Wait, this is a great example of how poor the CSAG plan was. Tom Tomzak, who was an assistant construction manager on the Mickey and Friends garage at Disneyland, a 10,250 space garage, said that came on time and under budget at $240 million. An LA Times article in 1994 said that was going to cost $223 million. What CSAG proposed was the largest parking structure in North America at 12,000 spaces, and they only funded $144 million. In no way did they provide a framework for negotiation.
Gentlemen, we're coming down to, what, the 1-minute warning, Princess? Okay, so is the NFL going to foreclose any talk of what we've been doing here today? Isn't that really going to be the narrative going forward?
Oh, absolutely. This is the NFL's game, and I think the whole thing is about, are these cities willing to pay to host the NFL show, and what are they willing to do to prove that they are there, that they have enough together to make it possible? And the NFL is determined to move to LA. And there are 2 or 3 teams that are 2 teams out of the 3 that are going to move there, and so we'll see which ones those are.
Tony.
Yeah, they're going to try to make it so nobody loses, or at least everybody walks away with something they're comfortable with.
What are we going to walk away with?
Well, they're going to.
The Raiders?
No, they're either going to end up in Inglewood as the #2 team if they can stomach that and the financials of that, or in Mission Valley with a brand new stadium making many millions of dollars a year more than what they're making now.
Dan, I'll give you the last word. What does your crystal ball say?
The best case scenario here is that we would see the Raiders, who have really nothing going on in Oakland, partner up with the Rams in Inglewood, and that perhaps the Chargers get paid out to stay in San Diego. And if they do that, and maybe we can combine some additional money from the NFL, and we go back to the Stadium Convention Center, where you're basically talking about the stadium cost being covered from the Chargers and the NFL in large part, and then the taxpayers are just on the hook for the convention center with the TOT tax.
A lot of food left on the table. And straight ahead for Politically Speaking. Thanks, gentlemen.